Welcome back, everybody. This is Crashes and Taxes. I am Matt Johnson, the producer. I've got Rebecca with me, and we're talking about red flags for 2022. If you caught the last episode, we went deep on just some of the things about the stock market and how inflation and modern monetary theory is really driving up the stock market to artificially high levels, which gives people the illusion that everything is fine. But we know on the ground, you're seeing supply shelves being empty. You're seeing higher prices at the pump, higher prices everywhere, essentially, energy, food. And I think they're just about, I heard some rumor they're just about to tweak, shall we say, the measure of inflation, maybe the CPI. So I'm sure everything will be just fine, and we'll find out inflation is actually way higher than we. Okay. Anyway, they might change the definition of inflation to try to make us feel better about this, but it's all fake numbers. So we're going to talk about just red flags. So what are some of the things, Rebecca, that you're keeping an eye on this year that you think are going to kind of contribute to that tipping point that we talked about on the last episode? What are some of those trends?
Yeah, it's a great question. And so, let's just start with inflation for just 1 second, since you brought that up already. So we got the January inflation numbers for the full year of 2021, and it was 7%. 7% year over year. So that's the largest inflation number that we've had in 40 years, 4 decades.
And we're talking about CPI, where the energy is stripped, like energy and food prices are stripped out of it, which is where we're seeing 30-40% inflation, right?
You read my mind.
That's already a fake number. Okay.
Yeah. So they already tweaked CPI to be core CPI. So it's the core CPI number that's 7% core.
And
from
quotation
core
marks
pulls out the two largest, most inflationary things that occur in a U.S. citizen's budget on a monthly basis, which would, of course, be food and energy. So we see energy prices across the board in 2021 up some 30+%. Now, it breaks down gasoline, heating, all of those different things. It's not exactly 30% across the board, but at the top line number, it's some 33%. If you look at food is like meat, for example, went up over 12% year over year. So the inflation number's already been tweaked to make it already much more government friendly, and yet, which is pulling out the food, pulling out the energy, and yet we still have a 7% year over year number, which is just unheard of. It's just crazy, which basically lets us know that you can't just print money indefinitely and forever without any impact on the economy. And we knew this, right? It's just basic. Let's just go back to the basics of money. Fiat money that is not backed by gold or something that has true intrinsic value. It's just a piece of paper. It only derives its value from the full faith and credit of the insurer that's backing it, in this case, the United States government. But the United States government can certainly go into default, just like, Rome defaulted and imploded upon itself. We're sort of kind of going down that same path. But the fiat money value inherently is through its scarcity. If you just think about the value of money, if everybody has tons of it, is it a value? Is everybody equally rich and everybody can go on a private plane and go shop at Neiman Marcus and live their best life on vacation? Can we all do that if everybody has that level of money? Or is what actually happens that we print all this extra money, we have a lot more cash flow in the system, and so therefore what happens, there's still only a finite amount of goods and services to be consumed, but there's all this excess cash flow. So what happens is prices go up, so that only still the scarce, this few that are at the top that have the most of the most can still buy those goods and buy those services or live that lifestyle.
Yeah, it doesn't change the economic reality.
That's what I'm saying. We can't all be rich at the same time. And therefore, we're all consuming more services. We're all buying more commoditized products. No, there's only so much that can be produced and consumed. And so you will always get an equilibrium of supply and demand. And if you give us more supply of money, that will immediately raise the demand for the goods and services, which are finite and limited. And therefore, prices will go up to adjust to only take and supply the finite, limited services and goods to the people that are at the top of the echelon. And it will continue. We will never be able to print our way to wealth. It's not, it's an illusion. It is not possible. And this is the tipping point that we're finally at to realize, because it's great in theory to say we can just make everybody rich. Why don't we just, if we can just print all the wealth that we ever need, why don't we just print the money to pay the taxes and just not have anybody pay taxes?
Yeah, exactly.
there is an inherent value, and you destroy that inherent value the more and more and more money that you print. And it's just that simple. And it's basic economics. This is like your first macroeconomic class. You could learn this.
I know that what's funny about modern monetary theory is that it's the kind of theory that only Ivy League people could come up with, because it confounds the laws of reality. Only Ivy League people can convince themselves that they've somehow mastered the universe to the extent that they can reverse basic laws of supply and demand somehow. So that's the number one thing that I'm keeping an eye on for 2022. Let's talk a little bit about legislation and some of the things that might come down from the government. We talked a little bit about in the last episode about vaccine mandates for Canadian truckers that might have a huge impact on the supply chain. Is there anything else legislation-wise you feel like might come in before the midterms that can really contribute to this tipping point?
Well, the big push right now, of course, is to get rid of the filibuster. And the filibuster has been a Democratic protectionary policy in the Senate for as long as I can remember. I can't remember when it wasn't existing. And the filibuster basically says that you need a 60-person vote. It's not a supermajority, but you definitely don't need a 50-50. You can't have a 50-person vote and pass a major policy. It's just not possible. You think that Kamala Harris would break a tie vote, but when you're passing massive legislation like the Voting Rights Act that they're trying to pass at the federal level, they're trying to nationalize our elections. And this is in response to what the Democrats perceive as an overreaction by some conservative or red states since the last 2020 election was so questionable. And that's a whole nother topic. But just to stay on the fact that a lot of people question the legitimacy of the election with multiple things happening, from a statistical basis, it bothered me a lot. Because when you have multiple states do things that are statistically such an anomaly that they all happen at the same time and the same time frame, you start to ask yourself, statistics doesn't buy that. There's just some things that are just the probability of them happening are so low that they're just not going to happen.
Right.
And so I'll leave that at that. But moving on from that, some conservative states responded with, banning ballot harvesting, for example, and drop boxes and requiring IDs. I think that's the big thing that really starts to really bother the Democrats, because they like to go into this sort of rehearsal of, that really disparately impacts the poor and minority communities. And I think we have to just dispel that. And that's not my area of expertise. And I certainly am not in that world. But I think that, what this National Voting Rights Act is purporting to do is basically force all states to have 2 weeks of advance voting. All states are forced to accept and provide for mail-in balloting. Drop boxes and ballot harvesting all becomes legal.
Got it.
And so you can see that this is the federalization of any kinds of protections to have a legitimate election. And I think that it bothers conservatives, because when you look at an administration that is selectively enforcing laws like immigration policy on the southern border, and we had 2 million people cross the border illegally in 2021, 2 million people. And you compare that to how many people voted in the last election. We're not talking small potatoes here. Right. So when you have a national law that basically institutionalizes the ability to not vote with voter IDs, California has just gone ahead and your state is crazy, Matt. It's gone ahead and said that you can print your ballots from home. So the paper, who's printing these ballots? What kind of a verification are we going to have that this is a U.S. citizen and that they have the right to vote? You have New York passing laws that now people can vote that are not legal citizens in local elections. Now, you might say, well, that's just, the local dog catcher and the school board, and their kids go to those schools and that affects that. And that's the argument that people use. And I'm not saying it's not a legitimate argument, but where does that end? You start going down that slippery slope of, well, now all these people are going to go vote, but they can't vote for the congressman or the senator or the governor or the president. So we have to give them the illegal voter ballot and not the legal. I mean, where
That's
does
weird.
Where
Well,
does
you can
this
just see
end?
where it's going. Yeah, I mean, you
That's
can
what
see
I'm
what they
saying.
want.
They
Yeah.
are trying to, it's like being the frogs in a pot, and
Right.
the water is just slowly turning up, and we just keep staying comfortable until we're just dead, because we literally boiled to death. We just never felt the pain. And this is the MO of anybody in any organization that's trying to implement radical change. They don't come at you and say, put a yellow star on your arm. That's not how it starts. They come at you saying, well, we need to track these people, and then we need to do this with these people, then we need to, and it's progressive. It's a progressive slow turn, and they're just getting people used to the ideal that people that are here that are not legal citizens have a right to vote.
Yeah, it does make you wonder how much of this, because for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction, right? So the more that one side pushes for certain things, it's that doesn't happen in a vacuum. You're going to see pushback against it. It's going to be interesting to see if certain legislative things, what type of pushback that gets. I mean, for example, you might see states just go, nope, not doing that. Florida might be one of them. Just say like, hey, nullification. We have every right to not follow that federal rule. We choose our own votes, and we'll let you know who we vote for. So I could see things like that happening.
I mean, and the Constitution is very clear in the matter that the elections are state run for a reason. We don't have a federal, we're not supposed to have a federal overlord. It is supposed to be, federalism is supposed to be the states are co-equal to the federal government. And to their credit, we certainly had the South that was a bad actor for many years, and Jim Crow laws and voting problems. So we had the Voting Rights Act. We had Southern states that were under federal oversight for a long time, where they had to get their stuff approved just to make sure that they weren't doing anything that was, discriminatory, which was 100% correct. I mean, that's 100% correct. We cannot have U.S. citizens being discriminated against in any way. It's just, it's against the 14th Amendment, Equal Protection Clause. It is a problem legally. But what we also cannot have is the federal government coming out and saying that, well, you states, you're going to have no protections on the legality and the veracity of your elections, and you have to allow for all this nefarious actors. And that's just not. So that is, even if this law passed, and let's just be clear, Matt, what they're talking about having to do to get this law passed. Biden went and had that big talk in Georgia where he was really pushing them to say, like, these crazy conservative states have gone so far to the extreme that they're requiring voting IDs for people to vote. And that's just too much. So now we need to break the filibuster, allow a non-60 majority to pass something that will be shoved down to the states that will force them to run their elections in certain ways. And of course, it's completely unconstitutional because the Constitution spells out elections in the Constitution itself. And so it just will never stand. If they break the filibuster, if any senator joins to break the filibuster, and so far Manchin and Sinema are the two conservative Democrats that are hanging on and saying we're not for this. But if they were to go and risk that political capital to do that, it's not going to stand through the Supreme Court, which is why they then talk about packing the Supreme Court. So they want you to break the filibuster. They want you to pack the Supreme Court because this is inherently unconstitutional, prima facie on its face. It will not stand. And they have to go through all these hoops to try to get it to stand. And it starts to make you wonder, what the hell are they doing? If they have to go to these extreme, breaking down our institutions that have been in place for centuries, a century now, right? What are they doing? What are they doing?
All right, so that leads to either one. I'll give you two choices to finish this out with, and people should go to walserwealth.com and check out and get connected, get on the mailing list, make sure to listen to the podcast, Crashes and Taxes, all that fun stuff. So let's finish out with this. So either the third trend is the midterms, which I could see, or my personal preference is I'm keeping a close eye on what's going on in cryptocurrency and blockchain, because I think that might be the magical escape hatch that prevents some of this from just completely being a powder keg that just blows off and you essentially pit two sides against each other, because I think it gives people that want to get out of the current system a way to get out. And I think it's too late for the US government to really do something that can sabotage that world. So do you believe the third trend that do you want to cover midterms and the craziness that might happen around there? Or do you want to talk about crypto and blockchain?
Let's just talk about both really fast. I can handle them both really quickly. I think the midterms.
4.5 minutes.
Yeah, I think the midterms are depending on what happens with the filibuster, right? If you see the filibuster be broken, you're going to see a backlash, I believe, like you've never seen. If that backlash isn't already here, if the CRT and all the school boards and the Department of Justice literally going after parents as domestic terrorists, if that wasn't enough to make people say, you people are out of your mind. It's sad though. I mean, you have to realize that the school boards of America, all these parents showing up and saying, take these masks off my kids, and, crying and, and screaming and saying, this isn't right. And the school board, you look at the school board and they just look like this. They just look like they're just like glazed over. And you're wondering why that's happening. It's because the CARES Act and the relief funds that came from the federal government for Corona that went to the school boards, outrageous. We're talking Tennessee alone. I just looked at Tennessee yesterday. They got almost $2.4 billion. And as a stipend, that as a part of that grant for relief from Corona, they had to agree to the mitigation policies of Corona from the NIH, the National Institute of Health, and the National Institutes of Health say masking, social distancing, vaccination requirements. And so the school boards took that money at the state level, and it is well beyond the school boards. If you want to know who to attack, you don't attack the school board. You go to your state and say, give the money back, and don't you ever commit us to doing things like this again with our kids. The midterms should already be a red wave based on what's happened in this country, I would expect. But if the filibuster gets broken and these things get passed, I think all hell is going to break. I mean, we could be talking civil war, Matt. I mean, it is getting crazy. So that's the midterms. I disagree with you. I wish I didn't, but I disagree with you on blockchain. I think that the people that believe that the government it's beyond the pale of them to reach, it's not accurate. I do agree that the SEC does not have the regulatory oversight and authority to pull into crypto, but you see that's what they're trying to do. And really, the government has the authority, and I don't want to tell you this, but I have to. The government has the authority to tell people and businesses and merchants that they cannot accept a certain type of payment as currency. They have the ability to do that in the stream of commerce. And so what you're going to see is, if you haven't seen it with Corona, Matt, if you haven't seen the depth and the breadth of the reaches of this federal government to dictate policy to private businesses. I mean, we are becoming so quickly a fascist country that basically policy is set at the federal level and then just dictated to private businesses, Google, Facebook, the tech autocratic, you know what I'm trying to say? We are becoming a fascist country that implements policy through private businesses at the direction of the federal government. And there's already, there's a case in Massachusetts at the federal level where Dr. Shiva, who ran for Senate in Massachusetts, his case, the discovery in that case is phenomenal. That case has brought out the fact that all of the social media giants, Facebook, Twitter, and Google all have a backdoor channel. This is all out in the discovery of Dr. Shiva's case in Massachusetts. They all have a backdoor channel where local administrators can go and type in a database and say, could you please take down this tweet? It releases this information. Could you please ban this person? It is a organized,
ongoing dialogue between the government and the big tech.
Action. It is state action. It is the state actors asking private businesses to take certain action against certain individuals to censor information. And of course, the state actors are the government, and the implementers are the social media giants. And they're all doing it because they want their Section 230, which makes them not a publisher and limits their liability, to remain. So you see that this is an interconnected web of the government and private businesses, which is the definition of fascism, already happening. So unless and until, Matt, we get a government that is put back in the box and the genie is put back in the bottle, you are going to have a government that has the authority to dictate to private businesses that they can accept cryptocurrency, much like they did with Silk Road and all of that. And if that happens, then you can't use it as a currency. And if you can't use it as a currency, if you can't buy and sell with your Bitcoin, what good does it do us?
I know what you mean. I don't think it matters, but I know what you mean.
I hope you're
Yeah,
right.
because I think as long as you can't take down the off ramps and on ramps, in other words, how you get your
Meaning that you
fiat
can get
currency in and out of
into
crypto.
dollars.
Exactly. Yes,
Yeah.
as long as you can, as long as they don't completely force all the Coinbase and FTX of the world, like as long as they don't force those companies, they already force them to follow KYC laws and all that stuff. So it's like they know who we are. But as long as they don't shut them down to where you can't get your Bitcoin into regular currency to spend it, which I think we're past that point. I think that would cause major issues. But if you can take your dollars, put them into Bitcoin, let them grow and fight against inflation, then take them back out again to spend them, I think the whole thing, I think it's too far gone for the government to shut down. That's my personal opinion from what I've seen.
So you believe, let me just point out one thing from the book to you. So you believe in gold, right? You believe in gold.
It depends on what you mean, but sure.
Well,
I believe right up until FDR confiscated it. Yes, right.
Okay,
it was fantastic.
That's exactly what I was just going to show you. Is that we used to believe that I hold a bunch of gold, and so my money is safe because even the currency can collapse of the world, but I've got all this gold until you have an FDR signed executive order that gave you less than 30 days to turn all of your gold in to the Federal Reserve. Otherwise, it was going to be confiscated anyways, and you weren't going to get anything. In fact, you were going to owe the government. So you just have to understand that if what has happened since coronavirus that has come out, if that hasn't convinced you of the depth of the ability for the federal government to set private policy and say you can't go here without a mask, you can't go there without social distancing, you got to put up these, it's just outrageous. And so I unfortunately don't think that it's the regulation has really been delivered yet on what would ultimately be the regulation of crypto. And so I think that it's a good hedge. I think it's a good additional tool in the arsenal, but I know some people that are just going all in on crypto, and if they're wrong on that bet, it's not going to be good for them. So I like it. I own it myself, but I own it as a piece of a puzzle, and it's not the biggest piece by far for those reasons. I just don't trust the government enough that and you have to understand, Matt, and this is the tipping point show that we already did. The central banks of the world control the monetary supply, and as the larger that crypto grows and the more applications of currency that we're using it for, Ethereum and all of its platforms, smart contracts, all those things, totally not what I'm talking about. As the use of crypto grows from a currency perspective, you are literally punching in the face the central banks that run this world. And that's where I think you're going to see a big problem. But then again, I think the central banks are about to collapse. So I'm okay with that.
That's what I was going to say. I think they're going to fight back with central bank digital currencies, and they're going to realize, oh crap, nobody wants our digital dollars. All right, we can talk about that for a long time.
We've got China going to digital currency. We've got the UK announcing both in 2021 that they're both going to digital currency. And then you've got the dollar as the world reserve currency. And that's the other problem that people in America aren't realizing. They're so short-sighted. We're so short-sighted as Americans. We don't think through these things. We're the world's reserve currency. And the second we go to digital currency, do we need a world reserve currency? Once everything is binary zeros and ones, do we need a reserve currency at all?
Yeah. Yep. No, America is in for a big shock. And there's lots of reasons for hope. We can talk about maybe we'll do another episode on optimism. We need to do one of those.
I think I will end on optimism. I think that we're going to go through a little bit of hell here, and I think everyone should prepare themselves. But at the end of it is a beautiful blue sky. I promise you, because we have been under such control and such there's no other way I can describe it than control, monetary control, central bank policy control, everything, the markets, we have been under so much control that we don't even know how things organically operate anymore. And it's going to be really great to see how that plays out once all of this does come to a head. Yeah.
Couldn't agree more. All right. WalserWealth.com. Everybody go check it out. Make sure that you are subscribed to the show so you keep getting the episodes. If you enjoy it, go leave a rating and a review for the podcast. That's the best way. If you whether it's this podcast or any other podcast, if you enjoy a show, that's one of the best ways that you can thank the host is to go leave them a review, say something nice, leave a 5-star review, because that makes a huge difference. Every podcaster reads all their reviews. It's inevitable. We do. So go leave a review. It's very much appreciated. Rebecca, as always, it's been a blast.
Matt, thank you so much. You're the best.
Thank you.